it really feels like an improvisation. Right away, the sound is so completely different. It just hurts. It hurts. It's like the sound of when you eat a cheese curd. Hey everyone, my name is Robert Fleitz from Tonebase, and today I'm going to be reacting to classical pianists' Tiny Desk concerts. In case you haven't already come across it, Tiny Desk concerts are a really unique concert format that's produced by NPR. They're these intimate, small concerts where artists from a variety of genres perform. And the Tiny Desk concerts have also hosted classical pianists. Many of the concerts of these classical pianists are on upright pianos, which if you browse the comments of these videos, it's a kind of controversial subject. And I think that the topic of performing on an upright piano is really quite interesting, which is why I wanted to look at a few of these examples today. I think that a lot of people view upright pianos and grand pianos as kind of interchangeable, or actually that the grand piano is kind of superior to the upright. But I really believe that upright pianos and grand pianos are not like the lesser and greater version of the same instrument, that they're two completely different instruments that require different things and that have different strengths. So I'm really eager to see how these superstar pianists that we're going to listen to deal with playing on an upright. Do they make the upright sound like a grand piano? How do they perform when they're in this more intimate setting? Let's dive in. This really already brings to the foreground some of the advantages of playing on an upright. Of course, when you know that you're going to have a concert on an upright piano, you think very carefully about what repertoire you're going to play. And I can't think of a better starting piece than this one. I mean, the piano, you can tell, it has this kind of punchy sound. It's not got the resonance of a big grand piano. I, luckily, am very blessed to have a grand piano here. It has a lot more resonance than when you listen to Hamelin playing that. And I think that that's actually a feature, not a bug. Instead of having all of the color of the grand piano, you really have to listen to the articulation, the texture of the attack. And also, I think that usually the pedal is not as strong on an upright. But here, Hamelin is using the pedal super skillfully. He's just kind of putting it down to create these big swells of sound. So dreamy and amazing timing here. I liked when there's that slightly more classical, I don't know the piece off the top of my head, but the moment where it's kind of like, and he's using the pedal to kind of build up the sound as opposed to, I finally figured out what notes it is. Also, I think that the contrast of dynamics keeps this piece really alive. It's not always so easy to make the big fortes and the tiny pianissimos on an upright. So this is the perfect kind of repertoire for this instrument. I suspect it's a little bit closer to the sound of the original instruments that the young Bach might have been using. I also just absolutely love that mysterious ending. It's the perfect way to kind of leave a question with your audience, a conversation starter. Like, here we go, welcome, let's enjoy this music together. A few things I'm noticing right off the bat. Since he can't have the volume and the intensity of a big piano, he's getting the intensity from the interplay of the counterpoint. And I noticed this also in the Bach, that he's really using timing a lot to create the drama instead of just the sheer sound. So pulling the time before that last chord. And of course, this is the L'Homme Armé theme. So we really need to hear it right off the bat. This part reminds me a little bit of the Busoni Second Sonatina, which I've been working on recently. Which we know that, of course, Hamelin has played. And it's juicy. It's juicy. It cannot be easy to do those kinds of gestures because the upright doesn't have the same amount of bounciness as a grand, so it's very impressive. Okay, I really love this piece, and I think that it was really interesting to hear him play it here. It is not easy to play very virtuosic, very fast-moving material like this on an upright because the action of the grand piano has a lot more bounce back. You get a lot more of that follow-through. Generally speaking, uprights, the key kind of just goes down. It doesn't give you as much kind of bounciness, doesn't give you as much feedback. And the other thing I love about this interpretation is that it really feels like an improvisation. In the competition setting, when you hear the Clyburn candidates do it, of course, it's very virtuosic. It's really a toccata fantasia. But here, it seems like Hamelin could as well just be in the living room, improvising, having a grand old time on this. And I mean, again, he does an amazing thing where he saves the use of the upright piano's kind of trashiness, clankiness, and that sound of just hitting. Like you always hear the keys just smacking against the strings, and he saves the best for last a little bit. He holds on to that sound until the very end, which is very dramatic. I mean, using the piano as a percussion instrument can be really a strong effect. And often we're taught on the grand piano to really hide it as much as possible, but on the upright, you can't get away from it. Okay, so next up we're going to watch Yunchan Lim. I actually have not watched this one at all. I've seen a little bits and pieces of Hamelin, I've seen little bits and pieces of some of the other ones, but this one I have never watched. Okay, I know we barely even listened to 2 seconds of this, but it's really interesting just how different the sound is immediately. I don't know if it's a different upright, if it's a different way of miking the instrument, but in any case, it sounds completely different from Hamelin. It somehow feels like Yunchan is really trying to recreate the sound of the grand piano. It's much less percussive, and it's much kind of richer in sound. Whereas I think Hamelin was very smartly trying to use the kind of unique aspects of the upright as the tool to play with. I was told by one of my teachers that he went to a conservatory where every practice room had a pristine upright. And when he would listen to the students practicing on these uprights, they sounded absolutely phenomenal. They were making the uprights sound like grand pianos. But when they went to play in the concert hall on the grand piano, suddenly the grand piano sounded like an upright. And I think this points to how the kind of piano that we practice on can really change our mindset and change the way that we conceive of the sound. Just listening to two pianists side by side, especially playing on such a kind of limited instrument, it's amazing to just hear how just right away the sound is so completely different. It's really amazing. Obviously, he's such an incredible pianist. It's just spectacular how he has this musical image clearly in his mind, which allows him to create such vivid differences in color. I mean, you have the... as well as the... He is able to create such clarity and strength in the lower register, which is very difficult on the upright. The strings just aren't as drastically longer as they are here, so my piano's a little out of tune, it seems. But he is able to create this just absolute fire in the lower register. And he also uses the higher register, the kind of twinkly, almost pale quality that the upright has, to create these very magical, sparkling effects. One thing I noticed from a technical standpoint that I think is interesting, I noticed that he is not so much using his upper body weight. Instead, his hands are kind of going down very much from the elbow. And here you see that he's using more of the control of the fingertips and the elbow and getting the power that he needs from that. Unrelated, but I really love his outfit. It's chic. It's kind of casual, but chic at the same time. I love that. That upper melody has such a piercing, kind of mournful quality. Just notice how his fingers are just dropping from right on the surface of the key. That's so sad. Somehow also on this instrument, it sounds so mournful. I think that, you know, when he's playing, he's really making a lot of that melodic line, and it has a piercing quality because of the nature of the instrument. It's very kind of direct. When you hear it in the context of this very lush accompaniment texture that he's created, it somehow sticks out in such a beautiful way that you just feel this kind of Tchaikovskyan sadness. And speaking about his kind of technical approach, when the melody returns, we saw how he was really barely lifting his fingers. And again, that's quite hard to do because of the action on the upright, but when he accomplished it as he did, it has this very understated sound quality, which for the return of that melody just feels so tragic and so kind of heartbreaking. And he's also using timing in a really unique way, the way that at the very end there, he just makes us wait for every single next note. It's so painful, honestly. And I think that you also have a little bit of sadness in hearing the moment where the harmony is kind of fully resonating on the instrument. You hear the slight imperfections in the piano's tuning and in the sound quality, which I think actually adds even more tragedy to this. It makes you feel like we're really like in a cold winter. October is here, and if you live in the northern climate like I do, you just know that the green is disappearing and the days are getting darker, and it just hurts. It hurts. And it's amazing, of course, as always, to watch how Yunchan, such a young pianist, but can capture such a profound feeling. Oh, I want to look actually at a few of the comments. Just curious, like, what are people feeling about this? This video has 1.5 million views almost. So I also think it's interesting, right here we can read a little bit of NPR almost apologizing for putting Yunchan in this situation. Even though he was under the weather, explaining to our audience why his voice was weak, you could never tell by his powerful command of every note, making our trusty upright sound like a 9-foot grand piano. Absolutely. I think he completely does make this instrument sound more like a grand piano. He's searching for the sound that makes us think of the fullness, the beautiful texture, the resonance of the big piano. Yunchan playing calmly in a chaotic room. Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it, but the aesthetic of the room is also very, very chaotic. I relate to that in my apartment. This piano better enjoy this moment because it'll never sound this beautiful again. That's pretty, that's pretty funny. Yunchan could play a toy piano and I'd still be moved. I would love to see that. All right, so up next we're going to listen to Víkingur Ólafsson, and of course, Víkingur has actually released albums where he records the repertoire on an upright piano, so I think that this should be kind of a natural extension of his artistic practice. I know that based on my video that I made about Víkingur Ólafsson last year, that he's a rather controversial figure in this audience. I'm personally quite a big fan of his, but let's see what he does in this concert. I love that little staccato in the left hand. You can hear how the felt doesn't cover the strings completely equally, so some notes just naturally pop out. So clearly a completely opposite approach to Yunchan Lim. Víkingur is actually showing us, look, this is an upright. I'm not pretending it's anything else. In fact, he's really emphasizing exactly what makes an upright an upright. I'm actually intrigued that the previous two pianists, Hamelin and Yunchan, didn't remove the front panel. When I have given performances on uprights, I find that removing the front panel is really, really helpful in kind of giving me that feeling of feedback that you get from the grand piano, because the sound is then, instead of just going from the back of the piano, it's also coming straight to you. So it feels like you have a little more control of the sound that way. Here, he's also using the practice pedal, which is a feature quite unique to upright pianos. Many of them have this. You might have it at home, where you have the ability to, with the middle pedal, pull this kind of felt screen in front of the strings. And as you could hear here, it doesn't cover the strings equally. So things pop out and there's that little like kind of squeaky sound sometimes. You hear that little squeaky sound? It's like the sound of when you eat a cheese curd. Víkingur is actually creating the situation where he's kind of applied a certain aleatoric element in the performance. Obviously, he's a very skilled pianist who also shows a lot with the articulation. Here, that's ever so slightly undermined by this kind of practice felt thing that he's decided to use. But I love that he's incorporating it because, well, this is an upright, and it's a completely different kind of sonic experience than what we might get otherwise. you can hear the action of the instrument. So this was very, very beautiful. I personally found it to be very moving. It's a piece that doesn't require a lot of technical mastery, but he's playing it in a very kind of contemporary manner. And of course, the recording quality also emphasizes the sound of the instrument, the breathing of the action. And I love when we hear that, especially on an upright, which is so delicate. This is Rameau, so we would think that we would need to play it like... And instead, he treats it almost like a pop song, and the harmonies suit it just like that. I mean, let's get Celine Dion to do a cover of Rameau, shall we? I think this shows us really a strong aspect of Víkingur's playing, which is when he takes these kinds of older pieces and puts a brand new spin on them by playing them in a way which, on the one hand, is perhaps not very historically accurate, but at the same time, I think captures that kind of freeness of interpretive spirit which existed before things became so standardized. Just quickly, I really love how the melody is clear, but then the accompaniment voices are like so on the edge of the string that they are just that little like tiniest squeak of sound, which you can really only get on this type of instrument. Let's see if I can't create it here. It's almost like playing on the double escapement on the grand piano. And it's leaning more towards that new age piano sound that we often hear. Is that the right word for that genre? New age pianists? You know, the ones that are like... Leave a comment down below if you buy my new age piano album. Let's maybe listen to one more. Listening to this makes me very nervous because I just think of how scary it is to play those runs in the right hand. Notice how she, in order to get more power this time, she actually lifted herself up. Okay, this is really cool because I think we're so used to hearing this piece on the most pristine grand pianos that for the first couple of minutes, it was kind of a jarring experience to hear it. But after a couple of minutes went by, I found myself kind of in the world of this particular sound quality, and it felt very brilliant. I think she's taking a similar approach to Yunchan, where she's treating this instrument like a grand piano. She's trying to find the sound that is reminiscent of a bigger instrument. I think that, of course, this is still a piece which perhaps I would rather hear her play on the grand piano. It's just the first time I sort of felt that the piece itself is pushing against the limits of the instrument. But at the same time, there's something very interesting about playing a piece that's associated with the grand piano, like the Chopin sonata, on the upright. It feels very overpowering, like you have a pianist whose virtuosity and skill cannot be contained by this instrument. We've already listened to a lot today. Of course, there's several other videos that I could examine further, and I could have easily probably made one single video about any of the ones that we watched. I think it's also really special to see pianists playing in this slightly offbeat, slightly unusual situation. We're so used to seeing pianists in such a formal setting that I think that this is a really special way to appreciate what they have to offer. Of course, I think that any of these pianists maybe accepting Víkingur Ólafsson, would probably feel better and happier on a grand piano. There's probably a reason why some of the Tiny Desk concerts do have grand pianos. If I know that I'm playing on an upright, then I just kind of completely change my approach. I know that everything that I would do here is not necessarily possible there. So it can feel limiting, but I think that in all these cases that we watched, you see the pianists taking the limits and actually running with them, and not trying to fight against it, but simply letting it be what it is. If you've got a piano at home, an electric keyboard, an upright, a grand, or whatever it may be, a roll-up piano, then check out Tonebase Premium, the platform that makes videos like this possible. There you will find lessons from some of the world's greatest teachers on all sorts of repertoire, from Bach to Chopin to Tchaikovsky, and so much more. Check the link in the description below to get started with a free trial. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you like what you've seen here, all of your engagement makes such a difference in helping us to continue bringing content like this to your screens here on YouTube. Also, leave me a comment down below. What's your favorite Tiny Desk concert? I love engaging with you all in the comments, so please sound off there and let's get a conversation going. I'm Robert Fleitz from Tonebase, and I'll see you next time. Okay, sorry, I got distracted. Anyway,